Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, I am excited today, thrilled to welcome my guest, Kara Goldin. She is the founder and CEO of Hint Water, the leader in unsweetened flavored water. And I've been following her entrepreneurial journey for a while, and I'm excited to unpack her story, her challenges, and successes. Also pretty excited as my kids absolutely love it. My 2.5-year-old loves the apple juice. He literally is all about that. So let's get to it. Kara Goldin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I love it.
Awesome. I am so happy and thrilled and honored and humbled to have you joining us today. So let's start. Let's talk about the early part of your career before the Hint Water. Let's bring it all the way back to your first job at Alphabet Toy Store in Scottsdale when you were 14 years old, buying toys for them. Let's talk about what you learned in that first job. I don't know if it was your first job, but maybe your first kind of real job. What did you learn there that really set you up for the world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so it's funny because I talk about that as my first kind of real job, although I've been corrected by since my book came out by a few people who have said, "Wait, I set up a camp with you when we were 12, and what about that?" Or, I was always kind of doing stuff, and I think more than anything, just to keep me busy. I was the last of 5 kids, so I always wanted to be older and get what my brothers. I felt cheated and ripped off by not having enough money, when my brothers and sisters could go to the mall and all of that. So, yeah, so I mean, it's a kind of a funny story that when I got the job at the toy store, I got it because my mom used to go to this fabric store next door to this toy store. And I don't know about you, but the fabric store just would bore me to tears, right? And so I'd do everything to get out of the fabric store, and there was a toy store, and I'm like, I'm just going to go to the toy store. Just come find me over there. And so I started doing that a few times, and the lady who owned the store said, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I said, "A job? I'm 14 years old." I didn't tell her I was 14, but I'm like, "Well, maybe. What would I do?" And she said, "You can do the cash register if you want to work on Sundays." And I mean, that's like a dream job, right? For a
14-year-old.
14-year-old.
I mean, what were they paying back? And I don't want to date you or kind of give away the age here, but Scottsdale, Arizona, 14 years old, cashier.
Yeah, what do you think I was making? I have to think.
I think you were making
at
least $7 an hour.
I think I was making 8, actually. It's funny. And
I'd be great on the Price is Right. I'd always be good on the Price is Right, I'm telling you.
Yeah, me too. I was just, but I think I was about 8, but yeah. So anyway, the cash register, you had me at the cash register, and it was a toy store. And so I thought it'd be great. And I would learn how to do those credit card machines and all that kind of stuff. And, just more than anything, people would come in on Sundays because I was not just doing the cash register, but I was the only one in the store. So people would come in and ask me, "Okay, what do I buy for my kid that's 12 that has everything?" And what I figured out is just have like a go-to plan. Have 10 things, and you just say the same 10 things, right? That are easy so that you could get the sale.
What's hot, what's popular, what you know is going to move.
Yeah, right. And then I started saying to Nancy, the owner of the store, I said, there's a lot of things in here that you don't need to buy again because nobody really wants them. And I don't mean to, burst your bubble, but and it was at that moment that she said, "Would you come with me to the buying show?" And I mean, I'm 14. I remember.
I mean, like a pig in shit. You're like, "Oh my
Right.
God, I get to go to the toy expo?" Like, so this is your first business trip.
And so I go to the toy fair and, basically, I mean, I remember going to the toy fair and looking at all different, things to potentially buy. And she would tell me why she couldn't buy those things. And she started talking to me about margin and
At
about,
14.
categories and things. And I remember coming home and talking to my parents at dinner. And I said, yeah, it was really cool. I learned about margins and I learned about, all this. And my dad's like, you're 14. I
Who
mean,
are
this is
you?
just right. And I mean, my dad was like, did you, I mean, have you shown him your ID? And I'm like, Dad, I don't have an ID. I'm 14.
I can't even
Right.
drive yet,
And,
Dad.
so, and I said, she just doesn't even want to know that I'm not 16 years old. So anyway, I mean, there were so many things that I learned and more than anything, I think back in that time, and of course I'm still smiling as I tell these stories. I just have I just have always had a good time. I think anybody who knew me as a kid, I just always like while people were going right, if it didn't sound like that was the right thing to do, I just went left, right? I just said, I'll see you later. I just don't feel like doing it, and I didn't. And so I think that that was the same thing for me, even for from a career standpoint, or even working at the toy store. It's just I wasn't doing what everybody did. I just did whatever I felt
When
like
they zigged, you
doing.
zagged.
Yeah. I mean, and we were all still friends, and it was all cool, but people just like sat there and laughed at me because I was usually doing something that no one else was.
And like, what were your friends thinking? I mean, at the age of 14, I bet you were one of the only ones that actually had a job, and this was like a real job. I mean, were you like the cool kid? You had some extra cash to, you know, go buy more toys, or they tried to
Go to
get
the
your employee
mall.
discount,
Yeah.
go to the
Yeah.
mall, right? They wanted to say, Carol, what's your employee discount over there? Let me backtrack for a second. I'm always curious, and if you don't mind me asking, what did your
Yeah.
parents do for a living?
So my dad actually founded a food, kind of founded a brand within a large company. So he was that you may be familiar with called Healthy Choice, and so he founded that brand
Weren't they purchased by
inside.
Conagra? Conagra?
Yeah, so they were originally he founded it inside of Armor Food Company, and then they got acquired by ConAgra. So I learned all about large companies acquiring other companies. Didn't know what I was learning at the time, but I learned about that. And the interesting thing is, my mom actually was an art history major. And what's fascinating to me that I didn't appreciate till much later in life was that, for somebody, she lived in Edina, Minnesota. If you know where Edina, that's where she grew up.
No
And
idea. I'd
it's
be
just
lying if I
outside of
said I did.
Minneapolis. It's
Oh, I've
like,
been to
right,
Minneapolis.
it's the Midwest, but she would have been early 90s. For somebody in the Midwest to go to college. She went to University of Minnesota. She was a woman. She's an art history major. Um, you know, Pretty incredible. I mean, there aren't a lot of people, unless you lived in New York City or Chicago at that age, who went to college. And so, anyway, so she went to University of Minnesota, and when she was having kids, then she stopped working and she stayed home with the kids. And then I mean, I think there was a countdown going on in her head,
When
thinking
is Kara going to be out of the house?
as soon as Kara goes to school. And so, I mean, almost as soon as I started kindergarten, she woke up and said, I want to go into fashion. And my dad was like, wait, what? We're living in Scottsdale. And, he was very supportive of her. But the one thing that he worried about was that he was going to have Stouffer's TV dinners. And I'll never forget it. He thought, I don't know if you remember Stouffer's TV
Of
dinners,
course.
but that for
I'm
my
not that
dad
young.
was like, you know, that was just the end. And most people would actually learn how to cook, but not my dad. He wanted, the meals done quickly. And so he worked for a food company. And I think along the way, my mom probably said, well, you work for a food company. I mean, maybe you should just make a better Stouffer's
Why don't
TV
you just
dinner.
figure it out?
Yeah, figure it out. And so he did. And that was, the beginnings of, what
See,
became a very large run for
see,
ConAgra.
so you've had this entrepreneur, it's in the blood. We talk about nature versus nurture. I mean, you've had it in the blood. A lot of entrepreneurs don't have that. Both my parents are teachers, and I've gone this path. So there's two different schools of thought to that. So let's fast forward, and after university, you jump into corporate America. Did you know, like at that first job when you were, were back in the day, a time, whether it be Time, CNN, even AOL, that like I don't want to work for other people. I want to do something myself. Did you ever
Yeah,
have that
not at
moment?
all. I mean, people have asked me that too. They say, "Do you hate working for people? Is that why you want to be an entrepreneur?" And I'm like, "No, I actually really like people a lot." But I think for me, Hint, my company, my day job, started off really by accident, and I think thinking back on it, when I moved from New York to San Francisco back in 1995, for me, Silicon Valley in San Francisco was Steve Jobs. And
Yeah, that was
I
a
had
tough
an
thing.
iMac in college, and,
Oh, you're one of the cool kids.
I
Were you one of the
was.
art?
And
Because you one of the artsy kids. I remember it was the artsy kids that had the Macs.
no, I
Yeah,
was a
no.
journalism major, and I was so tired of typing papers on that freaking like typewriter. And all of a sudden, the iMac came out, and all my toy from the toy store money, I ended up buying a Macintosh. I will venture to say that there weren't very many females who actually knew who Steve Jobs was. I mean,
Yeah,
back then, and I was obsessed with like the design and the small. I mean, they were larger than
yeah,
they
they
are
were.
even today, but they were the design of it for me just drew me in. And then obviously it was easier than typewriter, and much more convenient. And so when I moved to Silicon Valley, I thought, gosh, I wonder if I could just get a job at Apple. And then I kept thinking to myself, well, how's that going to happen? Because I've worked at Time and I've worked at CNN, but I haven't worked in tech. And so that's when I really actually my husband is a lawyer, and he had access to this system. This is like before Google, called LexisNexis, and
Mm-hmm.
it allowed you to go and look up companies. And so I would get on his system, and I started looking around for different articles on Steve Jobs, and then I saw that there was this spin out of Apple that was in San Mateo. I had driven by San Mateo, so I kind of knew where that was. It wasn't in San Francisco, but I close enough. And I thought maybe I could go and find a way to go work for somebody that would actually give me the thinking of Steve Jobs. And so there were five guys, not in a garage, but in an office in San Mateo, all different experiences, all wearing jeans and t-shirts, and very different than the culture that I had lived in New York. And I remember, talking to all of them. I cold called and said, "Hey, I just came out here, and I don't know anybody, but I think it's really cool that you guys are doing this CD-ROM shopping thing." And that's when it's funny because I remember it so clearly that I don't even think they asked me what I did for CNN or Time, but something my dad always said to me is brands matter, and they just matter. And he said they'll always matter. And so that was when I went in and had a conversation with these guys, and then they said, "Well, do you think you'd ever like want to come work for us?" I mean, I think they were drawn by they didn't even look at my resume. They were drawn by
What
the
was it?
brands that I worked for. What's that?
Yeah, I'm saying I was about to say like, what was it? I mean, it was a different than your traditional corporate America when your resume is everything. They took a different
Yeah,
approach.
but I think that they were all Silicon Valley people, and then they thought, "Oh wow, she's worked in media. This is kind of media, and maybe she'll bring something." And I said, "Well, what would I do for you guys?" And they said, "Maybe you could go out to these catalogers and talk to them and sell them and business." I said, "Yeah, maybe." And I'll never forget this one thing that one of the guys said to me. He said, "Do you think you can contribute?" And I thought, wow, and I said, yeah, I think I can. And it didn't matter what my, education, where I was educated, how much education I had. They wanted to know, would I be enjoyable to work with, and would I contribute? And I think that that is something that, fast forward and starting my own company, I mean, it's sort of, I think about that a lot, and it really is how great companies are made. You can go have a great idea, you can, you know, build a team, but at the end of the day, if you don't really, if you don't have contributors, I mean, they're sort of the, you know, they're the the bad in the chain, right? They're the people that can't that you're trying to figure out how to, you know, make up for what they're not doing, or, they're not speaking, or whatever it is. And so I think that was like a key thing that I learned.
So let me ask you this, and I was going to save it for later, but based on that point, I'd be remiss not to ask, at Hint now, when you're hiring, how much does that play into the interview process when you're having conversations? And I assume at this stage, you're hiring more the mid senior level folks. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but how does that play into how you interview and the questions that you ask to really find the right people who are those contributors who are going to make a great contribution to your organization and be part of the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one key thing is that when you're sort of this underdog, right? You're this underdog company. I mean, even though we're 15 years old, I still think that we operate very much like a startup. It's, as I think about our company as the puzzle never ends, right? It
I like
just
that. I'm
like,
going to
it
steal
just,
that.
right? You just
Borrow it.
keep adding on to it. And that's what not only building a company, but also building a category. And, and so with that, you have to have people that have that mindset. And I'm a huge believer that the people that have that mindset are really the ones that not only have, tenacity and resilience and all that kind of stuff, but and maybe you can see that stuff in the resume, but I think more than anything, you also want to look for curiosity, right? And you want
Being
to see
inquisitive.
what, right? And you want to see what kind of questions they're asking. And it's not, obviously, if you're, the CEO coming in and you're talking to a 21-year-old, I mean, it's scary, right? It doesn't matter even if I smile and I give them a hug or whatever it is, it
Make
doesn't
them feel
matter. It's
comfortable.
still,
No.
but yeah, it doesn't matter, but you want to see what kind of questions they ask, and how they're, and I think you can tell a lot about somebody, how they think about something, that they're not, canned questions, or they're not trying to figure out what time do I have to be in the office, or what, or whatever that, I
It's
don't know,
fascinating.
in a virtual world, whatever it is,
Yeah.
what's my camera going to look like, or whatever,
No, and I
but
love that. Yeah, I mean, it's a tremendous question because I'm a recruiter. My day job, I'm a recruiter. I have a recruiting consultancy, and I always say the candidates that ask the best questions during the interview, that's a telltale sign because
it
they're
is.
inquisitive. That's inquisitive. Being inquisitive is such a tremendous trait. So I'd be remiss if I have Kara Goldin on my show and I don't ask this question. What was the impetus behind Hintwater? Let's rewind. Let's take it back 2002, 2003. And just for a point of reference, my first real job out of school, I was working in a little company in Queens called Vitamin Water. So I was in deep with the big geyser guys over there, Darius
I
and,
did
and that
not know
crew.
that. Oh,
That was my
that's
first
incredible.
job out of school. I was doing fulfillment, so I got hired, and Rohan Oza we came on board to head up marketing over there, and it was fantastic. So that was my first foray into it. But I remember I heard about that was a sweetened product, very sweet, and I forgot the type of sugar. I used to be able to remember it, different type of non fructose glucose. But what was it? Were you like I'm tired of all this sugary stuff. I'm tired of soda. What was that impetus that said, I could do something
What
better
was
and
it?
different?
Yeah, so I didn't actually drink a lot of sugar, and for me it was diet sweetener. So my best
What would you
friend
go to?
was Diet Coke, and
Yeah.
I drank Diet Coke. I mean, I remember this actually from, way back when my mom was a Tab drinker. And so, of course, as a teenager, a high school kid, I'm not going to drink Tab.
That's that
I
cool.
went, right? I went from Coke. I never was going to drink Tab, and Diet Coke came out when I was in high school. And I remember, I mean, they supposedly didn't have like field marketing and stuff back then. I mean, I remember just getting handed Diet Coke. I mean, and thinking, eh, this tastes pretty good. I mean, it's not Tab, and
Gives you a little
it tastes
buzz.
pretty good. So I started drinking it, and then I started drinking more of it. And I never really thought that it was a problem because the word diet to me equated to health. And I just continued to drink it. And then, like I said, I mean, I'm working my buns off, enjoying my, what I'm doing in life. And my startup was acquired by America Online. I was running AOL's e-commerce and shopping partnerships for 7 years, and it was a crazy, crazy ride. I was on the plane all the time. I had
It was a
three
fun
young
time.
kids under the age of 4 at the time, and that's when it was $1 billion in revenue for AOL, and I decided it's time to leave. And that's when, while I was taking this break after AOL, that's when I really started thinking, I'm going to get myself in shape because I had gained weight. I didn't even know how much weight I had gained, to be honest with you. I mean, Adam, I had gained over 50 pounds
Wow.
over the course of, and as my girlfriend, still one of my best friends, lives in Vegas, is hysterical. I'll never forget. She said this to me. She said, "Kara, you wear your weight well." And I'm still
It's such a
staring at her
backhanded
thinking,
compliment, right? It's like, thanks. I've
I'm
heard that
like,
myself too. It's close. Why I wear, dark colors, right? Like, who
yeah,
says
I'm like, wait,
that?
what? What did you just say to me? And I remember it was that statement where I just said, "Oh my gosh, this something's got to change." So I knew how to work out. I was a competitive athlete growing up, and I started running, doing all these things. Nothing was working, and that's when I started some diets. I'd never dieted before in my life. I was reading labels. I was, really interested in all these different ingredients, and that's when one day I'd pretty much given up on sort of this whole diet and reading labels thing. And my Diet Coke was staring at me in the face. This is before I had to wear glasses. And I looked down and it was 10 calories. And there were all these different ingredients. And I thought, why is it that I'm giving a pass to my diet drink, but I'm for food, I would not be eating this?
Hmm.
And so I thought, I'm going to test this and see what happens. I didn't think there was going to be any difference. And in 2.5 weeks, I lost over 20 pounds, 24 pounds in
Just
two
from
and a half
cutting Diet
weeks.
Coke out.
Diet Coke. And
Wow.
and after about 3 days, I got really thirsty and I started drinking water. And I remember saying to my husband, I said, I've always known that water tastes better, but I'm sorry, that water
Shocking.
is boring, but it doesn't taste good to me. I mean, it's just blah. It's like there's nothing to it. And that's when I said, you know, I've been told for years, 8 glasses of water, whatever, I get it, but I just don't do it. And I'll end up, and that's why I drink so much Diet Coke. And then I had all this fruit on my counter. I started slicing up fruit and throwing it in the water. And so 2.5 weeks later, I lost all this weight. In addition, I had adult acne on my skin, which I never had even as a teenager, and it had shown up over the last few years. And then my energy levels just suddenly just flew back up again. And
Good old
I
water.
had heard about vitamin water actually, and but it just wasn't my thing. And I think I just mentioned vitamin water because what's funny, Adam, is when it took me about a year to go into the local store, and I started looking for this product because it was much more convenient to go buy a product that was pre-made, like my Diet Coke, and it wasn't there. And I remember the guy that was stocking the shelves at Whole Foods said, "Oh, there's this product called vitamin water." And I turned the bottle of vitamin water around, and there was no diet version of vitamin water at the
Yeah.
time.
Crystalline fructose. That's what it was.
Yeah, but there was it had a ton of calories. There
Oh,
was
yeah.
no diet version of it. So I turned it around, and the guy who's, stocking the shelves, he said, uh, he said, "You should try vitamin water." And I said, "Oh, but that has a lot of stuff in it too, and it has all these calories." He said, "Wow, like the word vitamin
It makes you
sort of led
think.
me to believe."
Vitamins equal healthy. Diet equals healthy. That's not
Right, and
true.
so that's what I said to him. I was like, "Dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. That was me." And so what I found in this that was really, really interesting was not only was I educating myself, but I felt like I had stumbled upon something that a lot of people you know,
You
were
can't be the only
really.
one. If you have this thought, you cannot be the only one in your universe, in the universe. No
Yeah,
way.
but people were not, they just weren't paying attention. And, what I talk about a lot now is that I didn't realize for a couple of months. I knew I was launching a product and launching a company, but I didn't know I was launching a new category. And so by this, I mean that it was, launching a company is like climbing a mountain. Launching a category is like climbing Everest. And,
Love that.
and so not only I had two customers that needed to be educated. One was the stores, and then the buyer that was going to allow me to be on the shelf, and the other was the consumer. And so I would go in, I'd say, here's hint water, tastes great, want to try it. And they'd say, okay, well, we have this planogram, and the planogram is water and diet soda, and we have enhanced water, but that all has sweeteners in it. So
And
where
you're
do
like,
you
where's
fit?
this going to fit in? Where's the
And
shelf
I
space?
said, I'm a new category. And they say, like, against our pay grade, we can't allow you to go in there.
I cannot make space on the shelf for your unknown category. It's
Yeah.
not going to
And I mean,
happen.
back then, there was no direct to consumer
Right. There
business
was no
in
e-commerce or something
beverages.
like this.
I mean,
Right. They weren't
fast
shipping.
fo- fast forward years later, I mean, over 50% of our business right now is direct to consumer.
Tremendous.
And
Tremendous.
so but it wasn't happening then. And so anyway, it was an interesting, definitely an interesting time. And a lot of people have asked me why I wrote the book, because I would share these stories, like some of the ones that I'm talking to you about right now. And it's so many, you just couldn't make it up. I mean, so many things along the way that were just crazy to people.
And what would you say was the hardest lesson, obviously, like the hardest lesson that you did not expect coming when you launch in those early days? One of those hit you over the head, punch you in the face kind of moments where maybe you doubted yourself, or maybe you didn't doubt yourself, but maybe you doubted yourself and questioned, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? I have small kids at home. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. Was there that moment?
Oh, there were so many moments. I mean, there were so many moments along the way. It's like, I don't know about you, but at points along the way, you get energized and you think, okay, I'm going to go try and get a product on the shelf at Whole Foods. But then that little voice in your head says, well, what if the guy isn't at Whole Foods? Or what if he says no? Right? Just getting the product on the shelf. And then, it expands from there where, you know, the kids were at home. I had four kids under the age of 6. I was not the profile of an
How are you doing
entrepreneur.
this? How
I
did you
know, it was
manage?
insane. And I had help. And, my husband, who was a Silicon Valley, intellectual property attorney, he was taking a break as well. And I mean, I laughed because he didn't think this was a great idea. He said, you've had a lot of great ideas, but this one is not one of them. But I think, he would say that he joined primarily because, I was writing like $50,000 checks off our personal bank account. He said, "You can spend money like no other person. So I'm going to hang out and help you schlep the cases around a little
I love
bit."
it.
And then I think what he saw that he really didn't know that uh, he's an accidental entrepreneur as well, that he really saw that there was purpose here, and that my whole purpose in starting this company then and still today is, I didn't think I I, I don't view it as a beverage company. I view it as a company that is helping people change their health
I love
and
it.
educating people. And that was my whole purpose from day one. And the beverage was the tool. And that's it.
Kara, what was the biggest challenge you faced educating consumers about this new category?
So I remember going in, and going in not only to buyers, it was really the same thing, as well as consumers, and or consumers would try it and they'd say, "Oh, this is really great. It's an unsweetened flavored water. What's it sweetened with?" And I'm like, "Okay, there's no sweeteners." And they say,
Well,
"Well,
what is
is
it?
there crystalline fructose? Is there, at that time, sucralose or any?" Nope, nothing. And they'd say, "Oh, well, it tastes sweet." And I said, "It's
Actual,
fruit,
it's actual
right?"
fruit. Yeah.
Right. And
Crazy,
so
crazy that actual real fruit is actually sweet. It actually adds a flavor that tastes like the actual fruit. Crazy
yeah,
concept
and
here.
so it was just, people would sit there and you could just see their brain kind of working in the process. But it was funny because we didn't have the, I mean, vitamin water was confusing for people
Very.
against hint, right? Because people would say, oh, well, there's vitamin water. And we'd say, it's just a very different product. It's a different category. It's a very, very different product. And what we realized after a while, I mean, the real hook for us, we didn't have the money to go out and outspend vitamin water or any of these other drinks. And we just didn't have it. I was self-financing the company for the first couple of years. So what we figured out, there's this interesting little thing that happens with water where, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, but with events. So if you do an event in a city and you get some sort of permit, you have to, if it's over a certain number of people, you have to have water
Right.
for the people that are attending. So we would start getting phone calls because people would think, oh, there's that new water, and they'd hit us up for it. And so what we realized is that a lot of people would, for these runs or, PTA or whatever it was, they would then reach out to us and I'd say, hey, where did you hear about it? And they'd say, well, your product sponsored our event. And what I realized is that there's this connection when people are spending their Saturday going to something that they care about, some cause, and we're sponsoring that event, they would feel connected to us and they'd want to know what our connection was to it. And, sometimes we did have it and sometimes we didn't. We just said, no, it sounded like a great event and we wanted to, give water to it. And they'd say, that's really great. Well, thank you for doing that. And so suddenly there was this gratitude feeling where, we just said, gosh, this is what we're doing. And, what was interesting, so many of those people then would go into their local store and they'd ask for our product.
You
And so
created the demand.
it
The
created
brand,
the
the brand
demand.
created its own demand.
So you find your audiences and, and again, people would say, oh, you guys are, so authentic. We didn't really seek these things out. We weren't,
You can't seek authentic. Authentic is just what you are. It's
yeah.
just real. You can't fake it.
And that's what we did. And, when people would say, oh, well, Vitamin Water's doing this event and they're paying
Different
$50,000,
breed.
my response was like, you should take the $50,000. Like, it's like a nonprofit. I mean,
Go
I
for
said,
it.
that sounds great. I mean, I would sell against us on this stuff. And again, people would come back later on and say, I remember when you said that. And I said, yeah, sounds like me. I probably did say that.
And Kara, I want to be conscious of your time and make sure that we do talk about your book Undaunted that came out in October. And you've unpacked tons of stories here and you do it on so many other shows. But I wanted to ask you, what was that process like for you writing a book? What did you learn about yourself through the journey of actually writing the book?
So I started the book because I was traveling so much to do talks and also just through my adventures with Hint. And, rather than sitting in my Holiday Inn Express in towns that I didn't know anybody in, and watching CNN, I decided I would start journaling about 5 years ago. And so that journal really stemmed from that Q&A that came after the talks and people would ask questions. And I felt like there was a strong opinion about entrepreneurs, no matter what the industry or gender, that they were fearless risk takers and that they were born that way and that they, were either unicorns or they were, failures. And I thought there's so much in between.
Yeah,
And
it's tough to
and that
polarize.
needs to be told. And so I'd start journaling my thoughts, and then I started talking more and more about this stuff. And I think I felt like about 2 years ago, that's when I said this should just be my journal should be bound because it can really help a lot of people. I didn't even think of it as a book. And it's funny because a lot of people have books on their or becoming a published author as on their bucket list. It was not on mine. I was a journalism major and it still wasn't on mine. I really was not thinking in that direction, but I learned a lot about, publishing as well. And, just as just one example, I mean, when I was shopping my journal essentially and talking about this, there were a handful of publishers that I was talking to that did not want me to, they wanted me to publish their book. They didn't want to publish the book that I wanted. And it
Hmm.
sounds sort of like ironic a little bit, but it's an interesting thing, especially about women executives, where it was Did you not want to work for anybody? Did you have a terrible time in Silicon Valley? Did you,
They were
and
trying to pull
I'm
out
like,
the negative.
yeah, and it just was not, I mean,
That wasn't the story. That's
anybody
not
who's
your story.
yeah, and anybody who's read this book will see that, I mean, I go at it, right? Like there were moments where, it wasn't all pretty. But
Never
at the
is.
end of the day, it's just, are you going to let those things stop you and block you, or do you keep moving on? And I think I really wanted to write the story of saying that it wasn't easy all the time. And there were moments when I thought we had to, close up shop and, we always made payroll for the last 15 years. That was the first thing that, that we never ever missed it.
It's
And,
critical.
we always thought about things like that. And other entrepreneurs need to hear those things and, think about those things. And those are things that I, think about and I pride myself on. Anyway, I wanted to get those messages out, but that was probably the biggest piece.
And what was the biggest fear or doubt that you had in your life that you overcame, that you truly felt was important to tell everybody so they could learn from it?
I mean, I think it's the building of hint because I, put a bunch of blocks in front of myself when I started this company thinking, I've never started a company before. I'm not in the beverage industry. People were saying to me, do you realize how competitive the beverage industry
Oh
is?
yeah.
You guys have no experience. By the way, for kids under the age of 6, I was not the profile. My husband was, joining me, and smart guy, lawyer, but didn't have beverage experience either. And so, again, I think you're always going to have your own doubts, but then you've got the doubters. The family's the worst, right? Because they don't want you to take risks. And your friends, I mean, like imagine this, Adam. I mean, here's this tech executive who did just fine, and we're redoing a house in San Francisco, and I would take early that I'd take samples of hint, and there was a private school right across the street from my house, and I knew some of the moms, but not all of them. But they would come into the lineup at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would ask my babysitter to make sure to watch the kids so I could run samples over of new flavors. That's how I got people to try it. So I'd sit there while they're driving
Consumer
through the
research.
line. That was my research. I
Yep, I
never,
love it.
and I'd say, will you just try this? And they were like, I don't know. I liked that one from yesterday. They never got out of the car and people were dying. I mean, they were just, they say, wait, what are you doing? Did you used to work at Coke before? I didn't.
No,
And they're
no.
like, wait, why aren't you working at, like, why don't you go work at Google or something? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I will, but I'm going to do this now.
Yeah,
And
you have to go with it.
that was really, because
And
I was interested and I was passionate about it because I was learning so much, Adam.
is it that? I mean, I consider myself an entrepreneur. I'm building my company. I'm building the media side to it, and I really think the true entrepreneurship is in here, and it's that drive to continue to build and grow. And for me, it's hard to explain to somebody because I say it's a feeling, and when you know it, you know it.
Yeah.
People ask me about the definition of an entrepreneur. I stopped asking that question a lot because I think
Well,
it's really hard to define what it is because it's different for everybody. But I always say that it's inside.
yeah, it's interesting. So many people said to me when I was starting Hint, "Don't you think it's risky that you're?" Well, first of all, they said, "Don't you think it's risky?" When I took a couple of years off after leaving AOL, they said, "So when are you going to go back to work?" And I said, "When? Like, how long do you think I can stay off work?" And because I mean, I'm taking care of kids, I am working,
I
but
am
what do
working.
you think? And they said, I don't know, 6 months, a year, 2 years was way too long. And after a while, I realized that nobody actually knew what the answer was, right? They would all come
No.
up with these opinions and they all varied so much. And then one day, I remember somebody saying this to me, how long are you going to stay off work? And don't you think it's risky? And I looked at him and I said, here's how I'm thinking about it. If you think that I was a good executive before and I was smart and I was, a contributor, you wanted me on the team, then does it really matter how much time I'm taking off? Because I pick up on things quickly. I can build teams. I'm a revenue producer. I have great ideas. All these, I'm scrappy. I can do lots of different things. I've worked in different industries, all these things. And so if I go start a company like Hint and it fails, don't you think it's just going to be like one more point to the story? And people said, well, I
Hmm.
don't know. And, and so I never really thought it was as risky as everybody else did. I mean, as a recruiter, don't
You
you, when
can't.
you hear people talk about their failures and you talk, I mean, if people say, even people I interview, if they say that they got fired, I'm like, why did you get fired? And, I remember in early days, people would say, oh, he got fired, and I said, why did he get fired? I don't know, but he got fired. And I said, no, you want to hear the story. Like,
Oh
why did he
yeah.
get fired?
Oh,
Right?
I got a good story for you off camera. How Gary V fired me. We'll talk about that. We'll
Uh,
talk about that afterwards. But I'd be remiss also again if I don't talk about the Kara Golden show. And I say this all the time, Kara. My show is my masterclass for me, my own personal
Yeah.
masterclass,
Yeah.
where I get to interview amazing folks like yourself and learn and absorb and put it all together. So for the Kara Golden show, what is like? Give me an example of one guest that maybe I want to see. Maybe it was an underdog. Maybe you weren't expecting such an amazing story. Someone that really blew your mind and taught you something completely new.
Gosh, there's so many. I actually just got off the phone with him. Do you know Guy Kawasaki?
Oh my God, I would love. Yeah, I've known him for a long. I've known of him for a long time.
Oh, he's amazing. He actually, we were just talking
Marketing
about
legend.
different platforms on, and he, of course, I mean, I'll never forget when I gave him a pre-copy of the book and tried to get him to do a quote on the back of my book. And I've known him for a long time, but I don't talk to him daily. But he said, "Hey, can I talk to you on the phone for a second?" I thought, "Oh, great, he's going to tell me he hates the book and he's not going to give me a quote." And he
It's the
said,
last thing I'm doing.
and he said, "So why do you think people would, after reading your book, why do you think they'd want to be an entrepreneur?" And I said, because I'm still smiling. And he said, "No." He said, seriously. And I said, because there's so many lessons and it's about your journey and what you learn along the
It's
way.
all
And
about the
those are the
journey.
best, those are the best stories where we can all learn from those things. And of course he did the quote on the back, but I think that I had him on my podcast and, obviously I knew, as I mentioned, I knew who Steve Jobs was way early on. I met Guy. Actually, Guy had started this thing back in my AOL days of garage.com. And so I knew who he was. And, but
He's a
anyway, I
legend.
sort of geeked out on him, on Steve Jobs and, just some of the things that he learned along the way. And, he wasn't always the most, as we've all read in the storybooks now on Steve, is he wasn't the most pleasant person in the world. But he was also, what I find oftentimes with, visionaries and founders is that they're just thinking about a lot, right? And they're just really, and it's really hard. I mean, you're trying to solve problems all the time, and there's a lot going on in your head, right? And so, and you have this timeline, and which, you can come off as a jerk, a bitch, whatever, and I just felt like just by talking to somebody like Guy and kind of hearing those stories, the early stories of Steve and sort of other founders, I mean, we really have related to that. And at the net of it, I think for us, I mean, just talking to Guy a few minutes ago, I'm talking to him about, the tools and some stuff that I can look on YouTube and find out some of the stuff, but I'm like, Guy, will you tell me this stuff? Give me
From the
the,
inside.
the cheat sheet on it. And again, I just think more than anything, having that network out there that is, no matter, even if you're the CEO of a company or it's always wanting to learn. I think Guy, we share that. So,
It's tremendous. Kara, what keeps you up at night these days?
uh, my dog Buster, who,
Wi- Love the little
Buster
answer. Love
is
it.
poor Buster. Okay, so Buster and Sadie. If yeah, so Buster is almost 12 years old. They're two Labradors, but Buster's really bummed out because I have three kids in college now and they're not
Oh,
here.
lonely.
And so they used to, stay up. There were nights that they were playing Fortnite till, I hate to say it, till 1, 2 a.m., especially during the pandemic. And, and then waking up in their pajamas and going to school and, whatever. And so he was right there. He lived this like 24-hour, have fun life. He's
Oh,
out
the
in the
dog living their
jacuzzi.
lives.
Yeah, jacuzzi. And now it's like, okay, Buster, 10 o'clock, let's go to bed. And so he's like 2
Party's
a.m.
over. Party's over,
He
Buster.
he paused me at 2 a.m. He's like, "Come on, Fortnite, let's do."
Oh man, that's crazy. So let's bring it home here. I love asking all my guests this question. Kara, what is the greatest piece of advice that you have ever received that you take action on every single day of your life?
The dots eventually connect, and I think about it. I say it every day.
Love it.
And that sometimes when you're in some challenging situation, or something just doesn't make sense, you're not really sure why it's there, and I sit there and I go through this process. I'm like, that was it. I know exactly why that was there, or that person was there and now they're not here, or whatever it is along the, and I always, with that too, I always try and find, especially when the dots connect, I try and find the good. I'm always like looking for the good in every sort of challenging time along the way.
So speaking of challenging times, the last 12 months have been challenging for every human being on this planet, and I like to see the good. I like to see the silver lining. So I'd love if you could share, Kara, one personal and one professional silver lining that you've experienced in the last 12 months during the pandemic.
So I'll go with professionally first. You know, I would say that being a little bit paranoid, so not having experience along the way, you realize, as I've always said to people, we have more people in our company that did not come from the beverage industry that are just smart and they want to learn and they're inquisitive and all
Good
that kind
people.
of stuff. But along the way, you start to do things because we wanted to scale, for example. So we really put an emphasis on automation.
Hmm.
And it got to a point where we're like, wait, why are we doing this? Why do we really care about automation? I mean, and we kept thinking, because we don't have any preservatives in our product, that at the end of the day, if somebody sneezed on the line, for example, I mean, vitamin water has tons of preservatives in it, right? Probably doesn't matter. For our product, it really matters. And so we went from 2 years ago having 4 people in the room where the bottles filled to 1, and then at the end of last year, right before the pandemic, down to 0. And so, we thought, okay, like we didn't have a party or anything. We just thought, all right, that's fine. What we realized when the pandemic hit, that it was a really big deal. And there were plants that were never paranoid and were not set up, and that were not prepared. Our e-commerce business, which was already set up, was, we started 7 years ago, tripled this year. And our overall business grew 50%. And I think a lot of the reason is that people they were sort of living in this world of, we don't need to innovate. Everything's fine. You just keep going the way you do the same thing day after Groundhog Day.
It's
But we
insanity.
have always been a little bit paranoid. And then finally, I think personally, um, I think like everybody else, the pandemic is, it's a double-edged sword, right? I'm happy that people, I think, are all over the world are more focused on health. Being able to spend some more time with my kids prior to them taking off, and just a few weeks ago. Happy that we were able to spend a little bit more time together then, and yeah, I think more than anything, I'm excited, like everybody else, to get traveling again and explore
We
and
will
see
get back to
people.
that. We will certainly get back to that. And Kara, last but not least, you look back on your life and your career, pre-Hint, building Hint to where Hint is now. And you look back at those hard times, professionally and personally, when you had to really dig down deep inside and harness that inner tenacity to pull yourself up and out of something. And in the same breath, when you look back now and you show gratitude and appreciation for everything that you've done, everything you built, that bottle that you're holding in your hand that you look at every single day and say, I created this. Kara Goldin, what is your North Star?
Helping. I think more than like looking for that it's the helper more than anything.
That's tremendous. Kara, I want to thank you for joining me and spending time with me and my audience today. This has been absolutely incredible. Everybody, please find out more at Hint Water. Check out drinkhint.com. Check out Kara's book, Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, and connect with Kara. Where can they connect with you? LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram?
All of it.
What's your best?
Kara Goldin with an I, and I would love to hear from you. And if you guys are interested in the entrepreneurial journey, Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, and read it while you're drinking Hint. Totally safe.
Double up on it. And thank you for everybody listening. And please be sure to join us next week, and we'll be back. And for more, check out thepodcast.com on all your social media channels. Subscribe, comment, and if you love this episode, give it a like, give it a share. It goes a long way. Remember, take care of each other, stay 6 feet apart, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.